Welcome back to Rudy Giuliani's Common Sense. It's our purpose to bring to bear the principle of common sense and rational discussion to the issues of our day. America was created at a time of great turmoil, tremendous disagreements, anger, hatred. There was a book written in 1776 that guided much of the discipline of thinking that brought to us the discovery of our freedoms, of our God-given freedoms. It was Thomas Paine's Common Sense, written in 1776, one of the first American bestsellers, in which Thomas Paine explained by rational principles the reason why these small colonies felt the necessity to separate from the gigantic Kingdom of England and the King of England. He explained their inherent desire for liberty, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and he explained it in ways that were understandable to the people, to all the people, not just to the educated upper class. Because the desire for freedom is classless. The desire for freedom adheres in the human mind and in the human soul. Today we face another time of turmoil, of anger, and very, very serious partisan division. This is exactly the time we should consult our history. Look at what we've done best in the past and see if we can't use some of that to help us now. We understand that they created the greatest country in the history of the world, the greatest democracy, a country that has taken more people out of poverty than any other country on earth. They weren't perfect men and women, and neither are we. But a great deal of the reason for America's constant ability to self-improve is because we're able to reason, we're able to talk, we're able to analyze. We are able to apply our God-given common sense. So let's do it. Today's episode, I'm going to entitle it The BLOCKBUSTER Report, The Rape of Ukraine, and you're going to see why. This is a very unusual opportunity that we're going to have. Today, we're going to be exposed to a situation that the left-wing media has spent thousands of hours trying to cover up, almost as much as they tried to cover up Biden. And it's going to give you a sense of what happens when you have this kind of rampant corruption like we have been describing over the course of the last 7 or 8 episodes. This is what happens on a major scale. There's a report that was issued some time ago. It was December 19th, 2017. It's from the Accounting Chamber. Now, the Accounting Chamber is a constitutional committee of some sort, an auditing committee. It's independent of the government, and it is supposed to assess the spending of money. And what it does here in assessing the spending of money is it points out that $5.3 billion between, I believe, 2014 and 2017, $5.3 billion is basically, in one way or another, not properly accounted for, and it's possible that it's more than $5.3 billion in foreign aid. I've been informed that about $3.7 billion of that is American foreign aid, and that information came from the expert in the Ukrainian parliament on budget and foreign aid. So, whatever, a good deal of it's American money, as you know. What are the problems that are listed in here? The problems are that, number one, they say the assistance was not focused on the needs of the government. Which means it was useless. Then the results of the projects that did happen did not meet the priorities and the expectations when they were funded by the United States or other governments. No one evaluated the effectiveness of it. In other words, there was no follow-up to say, oh, this was really a good project. This was a good use of 4 million or 5 million or 6 million. And the Ministry of Economic Development and Trade, which is supposed to evaluate these programs, did not and could not ensure proper accounting. They didn't provide for registration of the projects, and they admit they actually don't know how much money was actually spent. And they don't know how much money is actually unaccounted for. So let's say 5.3 billion in a little over 2 years is the minimum. Are you shocked? If you're not, $5.3 billion in unaccounted for, not properly evaluated foreign aid. A couple of examples might make it a little simpler. There's one project, like since 2009, the U.S., with the lion's share of the money, the Ukrainian government itself, and the UN putting in a small amount of euros, they've been building a database to do this for recording and monitoring projects using foreign funds. It hasn't been done yet. The money's been spent, but it hasn't been done yet. So it couldn't do its job to evaluate this or to investigate it. And there's legislation proposed for doing it, but the evaluation of the committee is that the legislation is inadequate. This report is an indictment of the corruption at the highest levels of the Ukrainian government. But it's also an indictment of the Obama administration. This is our money, and they didn't do a damn thing about it. Can you imagine if President Trump got this report? I don't know. I don't think he'd sleep through it. Don't think he would have slept through Benghazi either. But Obama certainly slept through it. He didn't do anything about it. Nothing. I don't know. Was he actually president? In any event, it's worse than that. It's worse than that because it's not just a matter of being negligent or grossly negligent. There's a reason that this report was never investigated. A specific reason why it was never investigated. And we're going to tell you that reason, and the witnesses are going to tell you that reason. And Mr. Durkash is going to tell you that reason, and you're going to see him recorded. So let's go to Durkash's interview on this subject. In his interview, he lays out the fact that this accounting chamber is an independent body that on December 19, 2017, reported that a minimum of $5.3 billion in foreign aid, and he described it as it was ineffectively and untransparently reported. So let's listen to his description of that and of the document of the accounting chamber. And remember, Mr. Durkash is the chairman of the Committee on Accountability. So this is his area of expertise within the Rada or the Parliament. So let's listen to his brief description, and then we'll go into a little more detail.
Which investigated the issues with the technical aid from United States to Ukraine.
Не только Соединенных Штатов, но и Европы в том числе.
Not in the United States, including the Europe and other sources.
И мы нашли те документы, которые показывают о неэффективности использования.
And member of parliament define the proofs is what ineffectively use this money, this aid here in Ukraine.
Мы увидели решение счетной палаты.
They find out that the conclusion of the accounting palate of Ukraine.
Это очень независимый
конституционный
орган.
Constitutional bodies of the Ukrainian
It's also
government.
been translated into English. This is done by an organization of your government that would be considered like an independent accounting
Они
organization.
входят в структуру правительства. Это
They not belong to the
независимая
Ukrainian government. This is
организация,
independent
So
organization.
this is what we would call an independent accounting
Independent
report.
accounting, yes.
And it goes to 19 December 2017. So Durkash points out that $5.3 billion was spent inappropriately and for unaccountable purposes. And then to make it easier for us, he tries to use a smaller example so we'll understand, 5.3 billion, there are a lot of examples. So he tries to use an example such as this. There's a $4 million grant to improve the Corruption Investigatory Bureau. And of that $4 million, $2 million is shared with an NGO or given to an NGO. And at best, $2 million shows up for the government agency. We don't know what happened to that $2 billion. I think this would be a good time for us to take a break. For those of you who know me, in addition to law and politics, I'm passionate about the Yankees, baseball, football, all sports to watch, golf to play, history to read, opera, classical music to listen to and watch, and cigars to relax and socialize. And I have definite opinions on the best cigars for the right time and the right place. And you'll hear about that too. But the revolution in cigars took place in the 1990s. Most cigars then were machine-made with foreign ingredients. Now it's just the opposite. Most are hecho a mano, man-made, all organic, natural, and premium. The revolution was led by one man and one man alone, Marvin Shanken, and Cigar Aficionado magazine. Marvin had been rating wines quite successfully for Wine Spectator magazine, and he brought the rating system to cigars. The first cigars rated in the 90s were gone in a flash. Even now, the first thing I do when I get my magazine is I go right to the ratings page. Here it is. 93, 91. Oh yeah, I'll go for that one. Then there'll be 94. Whew, 92. Problem is you got to get there fast because they go fast. This revolutionized the cigar industry and quality rose to the top. Then there's the cigar of the year. Try to get them as fast as possible because they're gone pretty quick. This magazine revolutionized the industry. And I'll tell you what, this month is Cigar of the Year. Cigar of the Year. What are these for? Cigar of the Year. You better get this magazine quick because these cigars are going to be gone very, very quickly. Go to the link on our website and order it. And you'll be able to get down to your cigar store and get to smoke a few of these, and you let me know which ones you like better, because we can have a really good conversation about it. Sometimes I do agree with Marvin, and when I don't, I let my opinion be known, and Marvin usually says, stick to the law. Also, along with rated cigars, there are articles on politics, sports, interesting profiles, and Marvin also has Wine Spectator, Spirit Advocate. If you like wine, if you like scotch, if you like bourbon, if you like rye, if you like vodka, if you like gin, they're the magazines for you. And you know what? Subscribe to Cigar Aficionado right now through the link on our website. Welcome back. And then, just 2 months ago, there was a criminal case filed because $700,000 for improving the Office of Corruption Investigations. They found $700,000 had been diverted, and it was spent for food, banquets, vodka, whiskey, partying, trips. So let's hear Mr. Durkash explain this. $5.3 billion was spent for inappropriate, unaccountable purposes.
Да, это написано.
Yes, it's exactly
Yes.
what it is.
И за
And that would
большими
be-
за большими цифрами есть и маленькие.
And the huge money, huge amount of money, you can find out a very small piece of this part of money.
Например,
example,
борьба с коррупцией.
For example, the fighting against
Вот я
corruption in
держу в
Ukraine.
руках одно из уголовных дел.
For example, this is the copy of the
где
part of the
4
criminal
4
investigation
миллионов, выделенных на борьбу с коррупцией.
when the $4 million US dollars
С 14 по 16 год
from 2014 to
от
2016
правительства Соединенных Штатов.
from the government of United States.
2 миллиона было абсолютно распылено между разными общественными
$2
организациями.
million was shared with a different NGO here in Ukraine.
Вручаю тоже.
So I can give it to you this and provide it to you right now.
Следующий документ,
The
это
next
буквально
papers,
свежий
net
документ.
documents is very fresh.
2 месяца.
Just recently it comes up. It's
Это
2
как, опять
months
же,
ago.
как опять же деньги,
The
которые
criminal
на борьбу с коррупцией,
investigation for fighting with corruption,
$700 тысяч долларов
$700,000
потрачено на
was
фуршеты,
spending for the just furшет, banquets,
аренду помещений, водка,
lease,
виски.
vodka, whiskey, for nothing.
Поэтому, естественно,
So this is what a large percentage of the money that the U.S. is giving to Ukraine is used for. And the 5.3 billion would have to be a very large percentage of the amount of money given during that period of time, I would assume.
То есть большую
not
часть
just
сумм,
a
которую они
small
получили с
percentage.
5-3 миллиардов.
да, мы говорим
Yes,
об
it is.
этом. Но
Yeah,
мы
we're talking
хотим
about
сказать,
that,
что мы
but-
нуждаемся.
Well, Mr. Durkash is absolutely right. We need the money. Of course, the government needs the money. This is the people's money. It's our money, our taxpayers' money, and it's taxpayers' money we're giving them to help them, and it's being diverted. And boy, is it being diverted. And in some cases, it's being stolen, as you will see. And remember, this all happened under Obama, 2014 to 2017. It all happened under Obama, and it all happened when Joe Biden was the point man for Ukraine. Our Joe was there. Our Joe was there to reduce corruption. He was there to create more accountability. And things got worse and much, much worse. And all of this was going on under his nose. Because he was too busy trying to figure out how much he was going to collect in bribes from the crookedest guy in Ukraine, Zlochevsky. Because if you think those payments to his son were anything else other than bribes, I guess the expression is I could sell you the Brooklyn Bridge. I mean, you have to be really stupid. Of course they were bribes, and there's testimony that they were bribes and that Zlochevsky made the deal with him in 2014 and said, you protect my company and I'll pay for your son's no-show job. And he paid him a lot, and the money keeps increasing as the Ukrainians keep investigating. It used to be 5 million. It's now up to about 8. And the major investigator, Kuliuk, tells me 8's the floor. It keeps continuing to grow. So we'll have to see what the end result is. But our point man was too interested in pulling in millions from Mykola Zlochevsky, who was one of the biggest crooks in the Ukraine, than to worry about 5.3 billion, of which 3.7 billion is American money, because it was being stolen under his nose. And I guess if he said much about it, they would have told him to keep his mouth shut because he was doing his own stealing. I mean, everybody in the Ukraine knew that Biden was corrupt. The only one who doesn't know it is the New York Times, the Washington Post, NBC, all the swamp media. Now, I want you to pay particular attention to this portion of Mr. Durkash's statement, interview, testimony, because this is something that you deliberately didn't hear from the corrupt Schiff, Pelosi, and all those Democratic phonies who attempted for improper purposes to remove the President of the United States and completely mischaracterized the conversation between Trump and Zelensky. Let's hear what a Ukrainian has to say about that, and a Ukrainian who's worried about corruption in his country and how it's hurting his people. Let's see what they have to say about it. You didn't hear this testimony before the witch hunt committee, did you?
Вопрос, куда их тратят.
But President Trump was the first president of the United States who asking the questions how they spend this money,
Как они тратятся с точки зрения граждан США и
how they
граждан
spend the
Украины.
point of view of the citizen of United States and the Ukrainian people.
All right, well, you heard that. President Trump was the first president who asked about how money was spent. The first president who asked about how money was spent. I don't know. Maybe they just go back to Obama because I don't think he asked many questions about anything. But they can't seem to remember another American president. And as Durkheim said, he's the first American president to ask how money was spent for the citizens of the U.S., and he mentioned Ukraine and Ukraine. This is a critical point, and it should have been included in the testimony during the witch hunt. It shows that President Trump had a perfect justification, almost a necessity, to have those discussions about corruption, including Biden's part in it, because it affected the relationship between the two countries. Went back to 2016, nothing to do with 2020. I'm sorry, you can't go take a bribe for 5 million, 8 million, 10 million, 20 million. You can't let a country go wildly corrupt and then say, oh, I'm running for president. You can't investigate me. I mean, an awful lot more Democrats would be running for president if they got immunity from major crimes. And the corrupt Democrats left out this aspect of it completely. That's what a president is supposed to do. He's supposed to try to hold accountable the spending of your taxpayer dollars and mine. And he's supposed to make sure that it helps the poor people of a country. And it doesn't go to the oligarchs and the crooked politicians, in this case, Democratic politicians, and their families. This money was going to the oligarchs in Ukraine, and it was going to Obama's fellow Democrats, from his vice president to the families of some other Democrats who also got rich off the Ukraine to the detriment of the people of the Ukraine and the people of the United States. And the swamp media wants us to ignore it. They want us to ignore it because it's going to show that the Obama administration may turn out to be one of the most corrupt administrations in our history. The Clinton Foundation alone might qualify it for that. You add this to it, we're talking about selling out public office all throughout the Obama administration for millions. In fact, not to digress, do you know the country that gave the most money to the Clinton Foundation? Little Ukraine. How could it be that the biggest contributor to the Clinton Foundation is the little government of Ukraine? 45 million population, struggling with an economic pressure from Russia. And in 2014, it had only $800,000 in the bank because the Ukrainian oligarchs, many of them friends of the Democrats, took every penny out of the Ukraine. Zlochevsky, Hunter Biden's boss and the guy that was paying Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, the guy who bribed Joe Biden, the guy who Joe Biden got out of trouble. That guy took out $5 billion. And Kolomoisky took out $7 million, and this other guy took out $8 million, and the Yanukovych, nobody knows how much he took out. One transaction alone, $7.5 billion. And all of this was happening under Obama's watchful eyes that were closed. These contributions were with money that was stolen from the poor people of the Ukraine. Take the Bank of Ukraine down to $800,000 under Obama's watchful eye. And meanwhile, Democratic pals are going there, making money, having their children make money, their brothers make money, their family make money. Come on, let's all go take the money from the Ukrainians. They're not watching. After all, we're only taking millions. The Ukrainians are stealing billions. It's more than just the Bidens. And that's the reason why they're covering it up. Because if revealed, it's going to show that the Obama administration was one of the most corrupt administrations in our history. The excesses and the crimes and the pay for play and the bribes that have never been investigated in the Clinton Foundation just continued with Biden. And if this is further investigated, some other people, just wait. But probably the worst part is that when the $5.3 billion in unaccountable foreign aid was revealed, President Obama didn't do what President Trump did, who acted as a steward for U.S. and Ukrainian money. Obama, Biden, and their corrupt embassy in Kiev, first of all, did nothing, which is the usual thing Obama did, and then worse. Nobody wanted to investigate. And you're going to hear why. Because they were afraid of the U.S. Embassy. They couldn't investigate. And they were blocked at every turn by the U.S. Embassy. Now I think we can say the corrupt U.S. Embassy in Kiev. And you're going to find out why they came to me. Listen to the testimony of Durkash.
People.
Now, as a result of this report, your government did try to make an attempt to determine the accountability of this spending. Is that correct? What was established? The police?
В каком-то виде. Эта история была, попытки были расследовать полицией, но когда...
Yes, it is. So they tried to investigate this case during the Ukrainian police.
Когда я и другие депутаты
When
задают
he's
вопросы
and
на
other
эту тему,
member of parliament asking this question,
никто не хочет связываться.
nobody wants to looking for any response. Nobody
Потому
wants
что все
to,
говорят, что опять
to be
придут,
involved in this
придут
investigation.
посольства,
Because
и
everybody declare
будут проблемы.
we're going to have some problem with the visa issue, we're going to have some huge pressure from United States Embassy.
And did the United States Embassy interfere in this process?
Это открытая информация.
Yeah, this is public information. Yes.
And what did the U.S.
Открыли и
Embassy?
посмотрели.
What did the U.S. Embassy do?
Я не могу говорить, что делало посольство. Я знаю, что делал я как депутат.
he can't say what the U.S. embassy do, but he had to declare what he do.
Я использовал все способы
He tried
получения
to
информации.
find out any sources how can get this information.
Громадный пакет
They keep the
документов.
huge folder of the papers,
Но мы не можем его реализовать сами.
but they cannot realize, they cannot release these papers without your help and without your
Поэтому я
legal
обратился к
investigation.
господину Джулиани.
That's why he called to Mr. Giuliani.
Я обратился к сенатору
Then he called to
вместе
the
со своим
senator
коллегой Дубинским
with his colleague, member of Ukrainian parliament, Alexander
о
Dubinsky,
необходимости создания межпарламентской группы,
to create the interparliamentary group between US
которая
and
будет называться «Стоп, друзья
Ukraine,
коррупции»,
who we call it the
«Друзья Украины, стоп коррупция».
Friends of Ukraine Stop Corruption.
И попросил господина Джулиани, как человека, который много занимался борьбой с коррупцией, эффективно,
And then I
помочь.
will ask Mr. Giuliani, who will be deep involved in the fighting against corruption in the United States, to help him.
This wasn't going on just for a year or two or three, by the way. Mr. Durkash explains that this was going on for 10 years for the entire Obama administration. This was one of their playgrounds. There are others, but this was one of their playgrounds, and now we have plenty of proof of it. Let's listen to the testimony on that.
Я хочу, чтобы было понятно, что на промежутке времени
He wants to clarify his statement that during the last 10 years
была построена схема, когда все жили
was created
хорошо.
the structure where everybody was happy,
Посольство,
embassy,
приближенные к посольству,
the people who've been around embassy,
организации активистов,
like NGO or civil activists,
часть людей в Министерстве экономики, которая фиксировала техническую
part
помощь.
of the official government employed who've been involved in this activity.
Поездки,
For example, traveling,
фуршеты,
fourchettes,
организация выпуска дорогих буклетов,
the issues published, the very expensive presentations,
отправленные деньги на экспертов.
the cover the all expenses for any consulting services.
Деньги направлены на написание законов, которые не работают.
Money for the legal consulting, for the creating the new laws who doesn't work, unfortunately.
Ну, например, вот НАБУ.
For example, NABU.
Было потрачено громадное количество
They spent
денег,
$1 billion
технической помощи.
technical aid from United States
И в результате мы имеем рейтинг НАБУ в
with
лице
zero,
граждан Украины,
results, and we have the rates of NABU
который меньше, чем рейтинг прокуратуры.
less than rate of the General Prosecutor
И
Office
меньше, чем рейтинг полиции.
and less than the rates of the Ukrainian police.
И меня, например, как гражданина.
Just in case there's any doubt about the embassy interfering in the investigation of these funds, Mr. Darkash answers, how often did the embassy interfere? Let's see what he
Я
says.
могу сказать, что просто блокировалась
I have to
информация.
say they blocked any information, any leaks, any published, anything what to not be approved previously by the U.S.
Тот, кто
Embassy.
начинал это расследование, тут же подвергался атакам.
And who started this investigation immediately was attacked by U.S. Embassy.
Вот этих вот не американского посольства.
Anyone trying to investigate was attacked viciously by the embassy, by the association of NGOs, all the left-wing groups, and also by the press. Sounds a little like America if you find evidence on a Democratic prince. But let's hear what Mr. Durkash has to say about that.
А вот этих организаций, которые
Was attacked by
кормятся-
NGO and by the civil activists.
So this is like what the press does for anyone in America who defends President Trump.
It's the same as what's going on in the States.
Поэтому
But the thing that's very surprising about this is that there could have been an attempt to create some accountability for this, and it's our embassy that is encouraging the waste of American money. Our embassy is encouraging the waste of American money. And there has to be a reason for that, Mr. Durkash. And what's the reason for it? Why does our embassy not want this investigated? Is it because of the way in which they distribute this money to NGOs that they favor and that are largely left-wing?
ну, я думаю, что это не прямая коррупция.
He said it's underlying corruption.
Это помощь в разных вопросах.
It helps with the different issues.
Воспитание вокруг себя таких вот прожирателей совместно денег.
It creates the people who just obtain this money.
В отдельных случаях уверен, что это коррупция.
And the different cases, he's sure for 1000% this is direct
Ну,
corruption.
мы не можем это
Part of the reason for this easy flow of money to all different people is the embassy is the one who made the decision. Even though the money was granted to a specific part of the Ukrainian government, the embassy would then step in and it would decide what NGO to give it to, non-government organization to give it to. What do you need the middleman for? Or is that just like the bagman or the agent when you have a Foreign Corrupt Practices Act case? Seems to me that way, and I think when this is laid out, you're going to see that. But let's hear Mr. Durkash's description.
разные подразделения, да, посольства.
Yes.
And during the Obama years, which is what we're talking about here, were those NGOs generally very activist, more or less left-wing groups like Soros's NGO?
Большая часть.
More of them.
Much more of them?
Much more of them.
So our taxpayer dollars were not going to the Interior Department or the Department of Justice or the Department of Labor or the Social Services Department of Ukraine. They were going to not government organizations, some of them out of Ukraine, outside of the Ukraine, that had a specific political philosophy and only to the ones that had a specific political philosophy: socialist, communist, anti-American, anarchist, philosophy that seeks to destroy the basic structure of a free economy and replace it with crippling socialism, maybe even communism, and maybe even some organizations that seek to deliberately undermine the values of Western civilization. This is what we're paying for. This is what your dollars are going to. You think your dollars are going to help fight corruption in the Ukraine. Hey, maybe some. Nowhere near all. This isn't some fantasy. This isn't some right-wing conspiracy. This is a socialist, anarchist conspiracy made up of people who would like to have one big world and everybody's under a socialist system and they're in charge. And I guess, like Soros, they keep their own wealth in businesses. So again, let's hear Derkash's description of how this works.
Ambassador.
So this process of unaccountability, at least from what you can tell, has been going on since 2014.
Этот процесс, о котором мы сейчас говорим, как минимум начался в 2014 году.
Думаю, что раньше.
Maybe early.
Maybe earlier. And does this involve any of the military spending?
Это касается любой военной помощи?
Думаю, что это отдельная история
No,
учета,
it's different
и
things
она
and
же-
separate things.
она же как бы
It's
секретная, непонятная.
not related to any military helps.
So we've heard Mr. Derkash's description. There are other witnesses to this. There are other witnesses on the record to this. But this is the most comprehensive of the witnesses on the record. But beyond Mr. Derkash, I interviewed two other witnesses, I'd say in different ways, both of whom have more detailed information about this. And I can't reveal them, and I can't show you tapes of them right now, because one way or another, they are actively investigating various aspects of this case. Some of them are investigating the collusion part, some are investigating the money laundering part, some are investigating the Biden part, but they are in very sensitive stages of this case. I took notes of what they told me, and I am free to disclose the following. These are two Ukrainian officials. One is a very brave and talented detective. He reminds me of the assistant U.S. attorneys, the FBI agents, and the detectives from the New York City Police Department I worked with when I was an assistant U.S. attorney and U.S. attorney. He's enthusiastic. He's honest. I think he's been fired 3 or 4 times because he was getting too close. And he is disgusted by the thieves in his government. And he is shocked by the thieves in our government. He didn't believe that similar things happen in the United States. He had this view of Americans as what we pretend we are, not as people who send our kids there for no-show jobs, get cases dismissed on crooked oligarchs. And he believes, got laundered money, and he believes some of it, including that 800,000 or 900,000, in addition to the money that went to Hunter Biden as a bribe, that there's more money that he's hot on the trail of. The other is a parliamentarian whose records of money laundering are about as precise and complete as you can get in a situation like that. You saw one example of it with that Latvian transaction. He's on the prowl for a lot more than that, and doesn't think he'll be completed with that until March, April. And it keeps moving a little bit. But I can be sure of certain things that they said to me. They've reviewed this in great detail as part of their investigation. The $5.3 billion can't be accounted for because they say, in many, many cases, they can prove it was diverted for a lot of it through the NGOs, but not all. It was diverted for two purposes. Some were politically corrupt purposes, to support extremely left-wing, socialist, communist, and what they describe as anarchist organizations, not just in Ukraine, but in other countries. So when they want a group of international people to say that Shokin is corrupt, even though there's no evidence of Shokin is corrupt, that's how they can produce that in 2 days. They call up the people they're paying off, the people that are sharing crooked money with them, and then they get the guy in London to say it, and the guy, he's running the anti-corruption thing in London, and he says, oh yes, for some time we've been concerned that Shokin is corrupt. Oh yeah, thank you for the 2 million. This is shocking. It's a shame. So some of it gets diverted for political purposes. And then a lot of it gets diverted to enrich the already rich oligarchs and the greedy American politicians. The money our president and Congress thinks is going to the Ukrainian people is going to Soros NGOs or Soros-like NGOs and other crooked intermediaries. One of them described it this way. I said, is there anything common among the NGOs? They said, yeah, I would describe them as they're either Soros NGOs or they're the children of Soros. And what he meant by that was there's not a single conservative, moderate, they're all left of left of left. And in Europe, when you get left of left of left, you're pretty much falling off the cliff. Sometimes Ukrainian agencies get zero, nothing. Sometimes they get some of it. And when they do, they're owned by the NGO or they're owned by the corrupt embassy staff, as NABU was, which we described to you earlier. This corruption, anti-corruption organization turned into a corrupt organization that was doing the bidding of Soros and his people. And I just have a hot, breaking story. I want to make sure I have this right. This happened within the last day or two. I want to show you that this continues to go on today in 2020. The process of corruption set up by Soros, by ANTAC, by the U.S. Embassy, which you have heard about from Durkash and these other witnesses, is going on today. Today, the Ukrainian National Police, within the last 2 days, filed a case against a man named Vitaly Shabunin. We'll put his name up on the screen for you. I know these names are difficult. Vitaly Shabunin runs ANTAC. Remember ANTAC? ANTAC is the Soros NGO, non-government organization, that got the dirty information on Trump, on Manafort, on Trump Jr. and the Trump campaign. They work with Ms. Shalupa, the crooked operative of the Democratic National Committee. They work with the crooked parliamentarian Lashenko. They work with Artem Sitnik, who held the press conference to try to drive Trump out of the race. And their case was dismissed as a result of Biden's bribe of Poroshenko, because Antonovich instructed Lutsenko to dismiss the case on ANTAC. She likes to say that Lutsenko has retracted it. I've questioned Lutsenko twice. Lutsenko has not retracted it. And there's individual evidence for it, including Kulyuk and, I believe, Kolonitsky. And the case was dismissed, and there's a letter to demonstrate it. She is lying. She's committing perjury. I know she's a left-wing saint. But every once in a while, even left-wing saints commit perjury, maybe more than you think. Well, Vitaly Shabunin, who is the head of ANTAC, this wonderful Soros anti-corruption organization, the one that put together the corrupt NABU. The Ukrainian National Police have just filed a case on him saying that $142 million is missing $142 million. I mean, these guys don't go cheap. And, and they don't have Joe Biden around to fix it. And they don't have Antonovich around to intimidate them to drop the case. The case will carry a criminal penalty of up to 7 or 8 years. 142 million is a lot of money to be missing from a anti-corruption NGO. Sounds like ANTAC is like NABU. It's a contradiction. It's a way to fool you. It's a way to fool you and the press that is willing to be fooled by anything Soros says, by anything Biden says, by anything the Clintons say. They're willing just to buy it. You know, like the case was debunked. The case is debunked. You've seen more evidence of this than anything ever claimed against Donald Trump. During the recent witch hunt, much was said by the Democrats about how important an ally Ukraine is to the United States, and how important it is to us in our dealing with Putin and in our dealing with Russia. What phonies! If they were interested in improving the situation of the Ukraine so that it could be a strong and reliable ally, not only against Russia, but in general, then they do something about the corruption there rather than for 11 years watch it, and as you've heard testimony, make it worse and participate in it and cover up what high members of their party did in selling out their offices. They do what President Trump did. President Trump, under Article 2 of the Constitution, carried out his duty in taking care that the laws are faithfully executed because he saw a corruption scheme that was 10 or 11 years old, that corrupted the highest levels of the Ukrainian government and some of the highest levels of our government. And he realized to create a strong ally in Ukraine that can assist us in dealing with Russia and other problems, we need an honest Ukraine. We need a Ukraine that when we give them $400,000 or $4 million or $10 million to help their people, it goes to help their people and it doesn't go into the pockets of their crooked oligarchs and our crooked vice president or our crooked vice president's son. That's a matter of national security, ladies and gentlemen. And the Democrat cover-up is just going to continue the corruption in the Ukraine, as this Shabunin case illustrates. This is a Soros protege. $142 million missing. With all this going on, they're still stealing because they are empowered. They are enabled. They're enabled by a crooked press that has a double standard, that lets them do anything they want, carry out hundreds of millions of dollars of fraud in the Clinton Foundation, have the Bidens repeatedly have him be point man, and the family walks out with millions of dollars and the U.S. gets screwed. In Iraq, we don't get our status of forces. In Ukraine, he does nothing about corruption and nothing about Russia. And in China, he can't get him out of the islands, but Hunter comes home with the Bank of China as a partner. Imagine the Bank of China being a partner with the son of the vice president who's negotiating with China, and the press says nothing. Are they corrupt? Yes. Are they going to do something about it? I pray that they do. I pray that there are consciences there that realize just how far they've let this go and how much it hurts our country to have this double standard. The Ukrainian people deserve much better than what they've been given by their own leaders, by Obama, Biden, Hillary taking all that money from a poor country like that, coming from what she knew was tainted sources. How disgusting. I truly love Ukraine. I love Ukraine because Ukraine was a country that was liberated by my hero, Ronald Reagan, in what was one of the most significant acts of a president of the United States in history. Not many presidents are liberators. Not many. Lincoln, Roosevelt, and Ronald Reagan liberated Eastern Europe, including Ukraine. I have good friends who are Ukrainian, and I've gotten to know the Ukrainian people. They're good people. They're honest people. It's a shame that all of this concentration on their crooks has hurt their reputation, because it could be said of us that the concentration on our crooks should hurt our reputation. But our media covers up our crooks. All of this must be investigated. This is not going to end by just sweeping it under the rug. This is not going to end by the crooked press continuing the cover-up. It could just get worse, like the recent arrest shows. This is only going to end if there's a serious, real, joint investigation between the United States, honest, of FBI agents and police officers, of which most are, not the crooks at the top, not the political sellouts at the top, but the agents and the field officers, like the ones I met a couple weeks ago, remind me of my old friends. And they have agents like that in Ukraine. I've met them, I've worked with them, just as dedicated, just as honest, and just as disgusted. You put a group together, you put a task force together, like we did with the Italian government to prosecute the mafia. I worked hand in hand for 3 years with Italian police officers, Italian detectives in my office in the U.S. Attorney's Office. And we had people in Italy, and we put thousands of mafia members in Italy and in the United States together. If we had just done it in one place or another, it would have continued. We have got to get to the bottom of this. There should be a joint task force, and it can't be done under any president better than President Donald Trump, because he will make sure it gets done. He has no interest here other than in wiping out this corruption and developing a strong ally and a strong Ukraine. And in my limited situation in finding out about President Zelensky, I believe that President Zelensky, although inexperienced and new, has the right direction. He's got the right conscience. After all, he did a television show before he became president in which he described, in somewhat comic fashion, but all of the corruption by these oligarchs. He wants to fix it. So instead of all this nonsense that we're going through, let's cooperate with them. Let's cooperate in ending it. Let's cooperate with a task force that roots out all of this corruption, prosecutes, if necessary, the highest person in their government and the highest person in our government that's involved, and then we can move on. And we can move on together as friends in countries in which our people are being served and are being served honestly. Thank you, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Rudy Giuliani's Common Sense. Thank you.